the 1.2 billion Ghana cedi fund for large businesses. The government is calling it the CARES package, known as the Ghana Coronavirus Alleviation and Revitalization of Enterprises Support. 1.2 billion for large businesses. How exactly is that going to, how can people benefit directly from this, and what's the criteria?
I'll take you back a little bit. COVID has brought in its wake two crises that the world has to manage. First is the health crisis, which we've been talking about. How many people are sick, how many people are losing their lives, how do we get recoveries back up, and ensure that people don't unnecessarily lose their lives or have dire health consequences as a result. The second is the economic crisis, because in managing COVID, a few things happen. The first option that the world has when we don't know about this virus, when it is a novel coronavirus, is to shut down and to mitigate risk. Once you shut down, a few things happen. The regular economic activity in any country or across the world, that ensures that there is growth, that people will have jobs, can make incomes from those jobs, can assure a certain quality of life. It all comes to a halt. And poverty begins to rise, because then people can't work and earn an income and make profits, and you have to find other resources to take care of people, to shore up people, feed the poor and the homeless, care for the sick, provide security because people are home, etc. So what is consequently happening is that the projections of growth for the world are being reversed. Indeed, the view is that the world economy will contract. In Ghana, we are pleased to say that though there's a shock to the Ghanaian economy, we will not contract. We will still grow, but we will grow at a very, very, very small pace. Indeed, we are projecting that we'll grow at about a rate of about 0.9%. Now, this is a country that, let's say, in 2016, grew at 3.4, which we were describing as one of the lowest growth rates that have been bequeathed to us by the previous administration. In 2017, we managed to bring up growth because of the increased economic activity to about 8.1. In 2018, on top of the earlier 8.1, we grew it again to about 6.3 because of the gradual increasing economic activity. 2019, 6.5. 2020, the target was to grow it to 6.8. But because of the shutdown, social distancing, and all of the things that we've done, which have a consequence of slowing down the economy, growth is now going to go to about 0.9%. And if you compare to the indicators the world over, ours is even, a moderate story.
Because we are not in the negative?
Well, yes, because we haven't at least gone negative. There are many economies that are actually going negative, because as they've shut down and economic activity is not progressing, productivity is slowed down, sometimes it's a bit lower. By the time you compare the nominal outturns for the year to the previous, you are realizing that you're actually deteriorating as a country. Thankfully, we are going to grow, but at a very slow rate, 0.9%. But a number of things have had to happen. If you look at what we call the fiscal tables that account for the incomes and expenditures, and if I just may show the fiscal tables to your cameras for your viewers at home, this is perhaps the most important part of Ghana's budget. That's where the real money is. Never mind all the English. The real money is in the fiscal tables. We were supposed to raise as a government a total of 67 billion cedis this year. But we agreed that we were going to spend 85 billion. That means that beyond the 67 that we raise, we were going to do what we call financing, i.e. borrowing or raising some money from elsewhere to fill the gap between our revenue and our expenditure. That was to the tune of about 18 billion. Now, because of COVID and the slowdown in economic activity, the revenues that government expects to pay salaries, get government agencies functioning, and do infrastructure, they are not coming in. In fact, as I'm leaving Parliament to your studios just a few minutes ago, we're in a meeting with the Ghana Revenue Authority trying to understand the revenue lines one by one and where the gaps are. So the finance minister, first of all, has revised that if he looks at the rate at which things have slowed down, instead of being able to raise 67 billion, he's going to be able to only raise 53 billion from revenues. That is a cut of about 13 billion Ghana cedis from taxes, excise duties, VAT, national health insurance levy, communication service tax, which he has cut down, by the way, etc. We're going to lose about 13 billion Ghana cedis from the originally programmed revenue. In addition to that, though we had agreed that we're going to spend 85 billion, COVID is now requiring us to spend some more money to do things that we hadn't programmed to do. We can't say because of COVID we are going to sack people, so we're going to cut down on wages and salaries. We can't do that. We can't say because of COVID, the goods and services budget generally that ministries, departments, and agencies are supposed to use to achieve their objectives, we're going to cut it down. Because if you do, then what you're going to end up with is that there'll be people working in the government sectors, but no money for them to work with. So they'll go to work and sit there till the day is over. Right. So you can't cut that down. The capital expenditure budget, you can't go too far with that as well. So essentially what is happening is that we have to spend extra because of COVID. And I'll come to what we are spending on. Again, if you look at the fiscal tables, while we programmed to spend 85 billion, now we have to raise it and spend 97 billion. That is an extra 11 billion Ghana cedis. So you will notice that in the finance minister's presentation, he's requesting Parliament to give him an extra 11 billion to spend. That's extra appropriation of 11 billion. What that means is that if initially we were going to spend about 18 billion, now we're going to end up spending about 44. I mean, if initially we were going to borrow 18 billion to plug the gap in our budget, because of the shortfalls in revenue and the increases in expenditure, we're going to have to spend an extra 44 billion. It's huge. It's unprecedented in Ghana's recent economic history. But I'm sure there is a clear understanding of why we're having to come this way. And what that means is that our deficit, that's the gap between our revenue and our expenditure every year, which we had managed to bring down to under 5% since this administration assumed power, will have to go up to about 11% of GDP. To do that, the minister has requested to suspend the Fiscal Responsibility Act so that we can do 13%. And keep the economy afloat, keep jobs, support lives, and support livelihoods. And so you notice that the president has done a number of things. Provide water for people, initially 3 months, now he's provided an extra 3 months, and he signaled in Sunday's address that he will do that to the end of the year. Electricity, for example, for Lifeline consumers for free, and those above Lifeline 50%. Initial 3 months, now 3 months, he says he's going to do it some more. He's given tax relief to the health workers. He's given 50% allowance top up to those who are treating patients. Money for those who are doing contact tracing as well, about 150 Ghana cedis per day. For example, security being provided at isolation centers. All sorts of infrastructure, all of these tests that we are conducting, over 350,000 of them, all at the expense of government. So all of these interventions now come together to require us to spend some more money because you can't stop any of them. And that is why he's asking for a total of 11 billion, out of which he's making over $1 billion, initially 600 million plus another 400 million as soft loans for micro, small and medium scale enterprises in the CAP bus credit line.
Yes, that's what that would have been my next question. That what's the difference in this 1.2 billion and that 1 billion that the NBSSI is managing to give to small businesses?
So the NBSSI puts up 600 million and then they manage to raise some more money to top up. That's what comes up to about 1 billion thereabout. In addition to that, the government has worked with the commercial banks to raise another 2 billion out of these estimates, 2 billion, which will then be accessed by the medium to large scale enterprises, those who would require some more a liquidity injection into their businesses. So for this 11 billion, you notice that there's a part of it that goes to support micro, small scale, medium scale enterprises. There's a part of it that goes to support the larger enterprises. There's also the unemployment insurance that we are introducing.
You see, it all sounds, because you're a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Finance, it all seems very easy for you to understand. But when you are home and you are hearing things about insurance, you are hearing packages and initiatives, all you ask yourself is, how do I benefit? We know insurance to be something that you pay for to save for a rainy day that will bail you out. No one, to the best of my knowledge, has paid anything to be rescued. So how is this an insurance scheme? Is anybody expected to pay money to be able to access it or not?
So here's what's going to happen. When Parliament is seized, yesterday and today we are debating this as to whether or not we should approve these monies. Because if we don't approve these monies, the minister responsible for finance and the government cannot even implement any of these things. I think by the end of the day today, we would have finished with that debate, and maybe tomorrow we'll take the vote on it. God willing, if we are successful and we get the vote to pass it, the minister will now come to the Committee of Finance with the specifics on each of these items. That is why when you hear people saying all of these details were not accounted for in there, it sounds like some people are just playing to the gallery, because there's a process we go through. Now, when it comes to the insurance, the draft plan as we have it now, for example, it's not that you will pay a premium for it. We are of the view that if you have been an employee who has been paying your taxes, then you have done well by this country when things were good for you. Today, if because of how COVID has impacted the economy, your organization is not able to continuously pay you, and whether you are temporarily unemployed or you're laid off or you're furloughed or whatever, we can look to what you have contributed in the past and provide you with a relief in terms of your salary for a period until there's recovery. You recall that a few weeks ago when I came here, and indeed I must give you some credit for it, a lot of your callers were asking us that they were teachers in private institutions, and because schools are down, they were not getting payment. And we said, well, there are two options. You can either go for the school can go for the credit line as part of the 2 billion that we're putting together, or we could also explore how we can support. There have been various other well-meaning citizens who are registered taxpayers who have been paying their taxes when times were good. And this is why when we say people should have tins and pay their taxes, it is important. So that in tough times, when you have an administration that says, we're going to put up an unemployment insurance scheme to look out for those who are paying their taxes and who today have been furloughed or laid off or their jobs suspended because times are hard, and support them with this one, then you become the beneficiary. So you would not have to pay a premium. What you have done in times past is what we can look to, and then based on that ensure that you benefit from this unemployment insurance that we
So it's not like the fellow system in England where government is paying 80% and the employer is expected to top up with 20%.
This is a very different, may I say, package that the government is putting together for salaried workers who have become unemployed as a result of COVID-19. And I keep hinting that if you were one of those who was paying your taxes when things were good and your TIN number exists, your records show, now would be a good time for your government to say, we know times are hard the world over, but here in Ghana, we can also do X or Y or Z for you. So it's all of these that come together that requires to spend that extra 44
How many people do you anticipate this will cover?
All of those details will be laid, because they have not been laid yet, I wouldn't want to go into them. They will be laid before the Committee of Finance in Parliament. Will have an opportunity to go through it. Do we propose a change to the numbers? Is it maybe less numbers and more money, or what? Because the amount is capped, because of the deficit numbers is capped. Once we do all of that and we take it back to the floor and Parliament approves it, we'll be in a position to now give full detail. Remember, the Finance Minister mentioned something else. 100 billion Ghana Cares program, which is supposed to now bring a revamping of the entire Ghanaian economy over the next 4 years. The details, he didn't go too much into it, and mentioned that His Excellency the President will flesh out all of those details. He will come to committee with the details in camera for committee to look at and do the necessary approvals, and then you will now hear us go through a full announcement of the various strands, what is going into infrastructure, what is going into supporting businesses, what is going into digitization, and all other areas. Agriculture, for example, food security is one of the major areas we have to pay attention to, because at this stage, when global trade is down and movement of food up and down is also a bit risky, food security is one of the things that you have to look to and ensure, else your population could even go into
I'm glad you mentioned agric, because even if it's not agric specific, the larger percentage of workers in the country are in the informal sector. So if we are aiming to get salaried workers, people whose works are on the books, to be the ones to benefit from this
unemployment insurance package.
So what happens to the larger percentage of people who are in the informal sector who do not have these graphic or laid down procedures? They may not have, for example, evidence to show of maybe taxes paid and TIN numbers. They live on hand to mouth. They sell nose masks on the streets.
So, for example, under the CAP business support of a little over 1 billion cedis, The target is for micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises that covers a lot of the people that you are talking about. And I've seen the application forms, etc., the online application platforms, etc. If you travel across the country and you interact with people in various districts, lots of people have registered, have applied for it. And even for all of them, we still require that you have a TIN number of some sort, because, Thelma, in the end, everybody needs to be identified by the tax authorities in this country. There's a local district assembly that can give you a TIN number that allows us to identify you as a contributor to the state. For many of them who have registered, who have filled and provided all of this information, they are those who are getting these disbursements of between 1,000 and about 3,000, 4,000 Ghana cedis to support their businesses at that level. They have that. You also have some of the traditional schemes such as Maslock, etc., which is also being better funded so that they can also ensure that a bit more liquidity is made available to these categories of informal businesses. And if we go specifically into agriculture, for example, you'll find that under the bigger intervention programs, like I mentioned, food security being one big chunk, a lot of interventions, even if not cash, a lot of interventions in terms of support products have started and are going to go some more into agric as a sector. So your question is spot on. Government is looking or has looked at all of these ones, and as much as we can afford within this resource envelope is what we are putting out there to help alleviate the plight of our people.
We do have a few of the finance minister's comments that we've captured, and I would like us to listen to those ones, and then the minister will have the opportunity to explain or to give more insight into what Mr. Ofori-Atta meant with those announcements in the budget statement. So let's listen very quickly to those ones and we'll be back.
And informed by broad consultations, we have prepared the Ghana COVID-19 Alleviation and Revitalization of Enterprises Support, the Ghana Cares Obatampa program for this very purpose. Mr. Speaker, the Ghana Cares Obatampa program is an unprecedented, bold, and audacious 100 billion program for us to reimagine and re-envision our future like never before. It is sequenced in two phases, Mr. Speaker. A stabilization phase that runs from July to the end of the year 2020, and a medium-term revitalization phase will accelerate the Ghana Beyond Aid transformation agenda. The stabilization phase of the Ghana Cares Obatampa program would ensure food security, protect businesses and worker incomes, strengthen the health system, and attract private investments and support Ghanaian businesses.
Welcome back, and that was Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta in his delivery to Parliament on Thursday. Honourable Minister, we've heard him saying these are unprecedented, and he's used certain words which some feel, if you're a government and you're caring for people, that's what a government is supposed to do. So why are we...
It is debatable, and I'll tell you why. In fact, yesterday during my submissions on the floor of Parliament in the debate, when I was speaking about the kind of interventions that the Akufo-Addo administration is rolling out there, I made note of the fact that between 2014 and 2016, when we had our last major economic crisis, and it was a twin crisis, where we had an economic crisis because revenues had gone very thin. Revenues had gone thin because economic activity had slowed down. Economic activity had slowed down because government was not investing in the productive sectors of the economy. And government was not investing in the productive sectors of the economy because when you go back to 2012, we spent so heavily during the election year, deficit, that's when the first set of twin deficits hit us so hard that by the time we entered 2013, the national purse could not afford to invest in the productive sectors. And as a result, and if you recall the words of the former president, we had chewed the meat down to the bone. We had to then resort to an IMF bailout. The consequence was that when that economic crisis hit us and we could not recruit people into the public services, we had all this backlog of nurses and other persons who had completed school and could not be recruited. We cancelled all sorts of allowances, etc. We were then hit with a second problem of an energy crisis, you will recall. Now, here's the point. If anybody argues that, well, but it's a job of government to care for the people, you will recall that between 2014 and 2016, we could not get such care when we were hit with twin crises that were not even global, but they were local, self-created crises. So, when the finance minister makes it a point to emphasize on what he calls the Obatampa program, that a good mother must be able to cover the chicks with her wings. It is significant because, yes, in one breath you are talking about what government should normally do, but he's drawing attention to the fact that in the last times we had such challenges, the government of Ghana, you forget about which administration, the government of Ghana, the state of Ghana, could not do this. But it is important now that because of where gradually our economic fortunes have improved to, we're able to afford doing this for the everyday Ghanaian.
We are having some messages on our social media asking, and this one is about the payment of locked up funds. Because today we are focusing on the finances of the country, you've told us that the receiver has started paying. Government has told us payments have gone out. How many people or how much money have we given out, and how much more is yet to be done? And this is for all those who have consistently sent us questions asking about the microfinance sector and what is being done.
Altogether, provision has been made to pay about 21 billion Ghana cedis to the various categories of persons whose funds were locked up in financial institutions. Thelma, let's go back a bit. The financial services crisis, and no matter how many times, I think sometimes people try to re-narrate it and change the story, we all remember it's not a new thing. You will recall that during election 2000, the then candidate Baumia spoke over and over again about the cancer in the financial services that needed to be resolved. Indeed, the previous administration recognized it and was giving what they called emergency liquidity assistance. That was their way of solving it, giving emergency liquidity assistance. What it meant was that taxpayers' money or money sitting at the Bank of Ghana is given to many of these institutions that had literally collapsed, couldn't pay salaries, couldn't pay deposits, and at the end of the month they'll give you money, you pay a bit of your salaries, you pay a bit of the deposits that are requested, but the problem had not been cured. Those were the times, or those were the things that led to a scenario where you will recall that at some of the savings and loans companies, police were beating people who were going to recover their money. You recall? I think sometimes we forget some of these things. Indeed, I will share with you when I'm done with our discussion today, over 80 special or specialized deposit institutions which went underground between about 2009 and 2016. I have a list of about 82 of them here, and nobody paid their money back to them because there was a cancer. The government was just putting some emergency liquidity assistance in it and covering it. Fast forward, the new governor of the central bank makes a request that this thing has to be cured once and for all. The ministry responsible for finance agrees, and receivers are appointed. Those receivers do a validation of the claims that have come in. Today, they have paid over 96% of the claims that have come in. They still have about some 4% to pay. That 4% they have to pay, they explain it clearly, is about 2 or 3 major causes. One, there are a lot of customers from the Ashanti region area, First Allied Savings and Loans, who, because of a credit situation with the company, were not getting access even to forms to fill for their claims. So they brought in late claims.
Okay.
B, there were a lot of customers, for example, of GN Savings and Loans, who, because of the litigation associated with it, were under the belief that the matters will be resolved at the company level, and also therefore did not bring in their claims. Indeed, it was last year when the president said everybody will be paid that you saw the last flood of requests coming. That's a little over 1 billion cedis extra or so. So they've paid over about 96%. They have about 4% more to pay, which they are going to settle in due course. And they've made the point that they're going to settle it in the shortest possible time. The data I have suggests that in about 2 months or so, they'll be completing some of these payments. Apart from these, you have those who also, because of the quantums of monies that they had, received cash payments and then what they call the bond. So if you had payments or if you had deposits above 70,000 cedis, they paid 70,000 cash and then the rest they converted into a non-interest bearing bond which matures over a 5-year period. So every year you get some payment. You can also choose to discount it now and take your money. But there are a lot of people who hold on to that paper that, well, the discount rates are a bit too high, so I'm holding the paper but I've not got my money, I've not been paid. And I think there needs to be some more education on that side of it. When you take these ones out, then you have those from like the men's golds who claim that they should also be covered by what the Bank of Ghana and the government have underwritten for those that were licensed deposit-taking institutions. And I think the government, with the greatest of respect, has been clear that those from men's gold are not persons who deposited monies with licensed deposit-taking institutions.
So the government is not going to pay men's gold customers?
The government is not in a position to refund monies to persons who gave monies to a third party to buy gold and keep for them. You recall, when the Security and Exchanges Commission warned that that activity was akin to deposit taking, they said no. They were giving money to men's gold to buy gold for them, and they will share the profits with them. Well and good. Today, what is being dealt with is those who are in the specialist or specialized deposit taking institutions, and they are almost done with that payment, and they are committed to concluding that payment. Indeed, I know of discussions to the effect that perhaps everybody who has been paid's name should be published. The millions of people who have been paid, the name should be published, so that for those who have received payments and continue for whatever reasons to say, I've not received my money, it can all be put out there for everybody to see that, well, all these millions.
So those who have their monies are paid more than those who do not.
Totally. They have admitted that they have just about 4% of the claims or the validated claims to pay. And they intend to complete that payment pretty shortly. But I think this whole basketing together to say that claims have not been paid and people are owed money is very unfortunate. And in the coming weeks, we are encouraging those at the forefront of the exercise to put out the details of, for example, how much claim was validated. For example, the fact that somebody makes a claim doesn't mean that that claim is validated. I'll give you a simple example. If you go deposit your money with an institution that promises you 70% returns on it, and that institution goes bust, and the government is supporting you by making a payment, and then comes to the point that, listen, they're going to be able to pay up to, let's say, your principal plus 25%, and you hold on that you have an extra 50% interest to collect. I mean, it's an interesting argument that you're making. So the bulk of it, 96% of it, has been paid. I do know of conversations even to publish the name, so there's clarity that a lot of these payments have been made. The outstanding 4% that perhaps are yet to get their payments, they are also going to be catered for. But for those who deposited monies with specialized deposits or licensed deposit-taking institutions, they can be rest assured that their investments will be paid back to them.
You are watching hashtag Ask the Info Ministry, and as we always do, we've given you the opportunity to send your questions to us ahead of time, and we'll put them to the minister on your behalf. So it's that time. Let's listen to the questions that you have, and we'll be back to continue the discussion.
Question to the minister is whether, now that the restriction of the churches have been lifted, the Sunday school department can go back to also worship. Secondly, would there be a reduction in fares now that vehicles are to take full capacity?
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for this opportunity. My name is Malagi. I'm speaking from Kasua. We are grateful to the President for the extension of the free water and electricity for the next 3 months, and also for the reduction in the toll tax. Honorable Minister, my question is, those of us in the informal sector that our businesses has collapsed due to the COVID-19, what can the government do to help us revamp our businesses? Thank you.
Because of the police headquarters, Cape Coast, the person of this minister said, they're putting funds in a while lifting bad free drivers, so some bets in for normal passengers.
Now that the transport operators can operate with full capacity, are we we going to see a reduction in transport fares? That's one. And again, going to church, now that the time has been increased to 2, and we know transportation services can operate in full capacity, then why can't we also go to church as well? So, Mr. Minister and then the President, we want to ask if what is the plan for the church? Is there going to be a review? Are we going to go back to church?
Good afternoon, Mr. Minister. My name is Brajo, and my concern relates to the President's last address, where lots of restrictions were eased. Yes. Since we always claim that we are informed by data and science, and I think most of our decisions should be based on that. For me, I'm surprised that this decision of lifting off these restrictions came in July, where we had our highest average daily rate of positivity of over 20%. And funny enough, our last 10,000 case we recorded came in just 18 days. The first came in 88 days, subsequent in 25 days, and the very last came in 18 days. This seeks to suggest that we aren't out of the woods yet. We don't have a handle over this thing yet. Why don't we proceed steadily? Why don't we enforce the observation of the protocols first?
Thank you all for sending those questions. So let's start, Honorable Minister, with the further easing of restrictions on religious activities. We are told that they can now operate for 2 hours.
While observing social distancing and the wearing of masks.
So the first question, is Sunday school now allowed to go back?
Well, there's a reason for which children are not going back to school. Children are not going back to school because we're of the view that social distancing and the observation of the preventive etiquette among children is a lot more difficult to enforce than among older persons. In that same spirit, you do not expect at this stage children to be going back into the Sunday schools, etc., because the same argument will prevail there. If the children will have a difficulty observing all of these preventive etiquette in class 4 and class 5 and class 2, if my little daughter, if you told her to socially distance or to wear a mask and she won't do it in school, why do you think she'll do it in Sunday school?
So Sunday schools are out.
Same rule applies. The question of a reduction in fares, I think about 2 hours ago, was resolved, where the GPITU and the Transport Owners Association, after the negotiations with government, has instructed that transport fares be reversed by 10%. Remember, there was a 15% increase for 3 reasons: spare parts, fuel, and social distancing. And now that we've dealt with the social distancing part and the negotiations have taken place, they've just announced about 2 hours ago that it should be reversed by 10%. So the net increase is going to be just about 5%, which will therefore be able to account for the fuel and then the spare parts argument. And any further potential increase because of social distancing now doesn't become something they can hold on.
And then there's the matter of social distancing in public transport, because we are still fighting to get people to keep the distance, and yet we are saying vehicles can load at full capacity.
I'll come to that shortly. Let me just clear this one, because that one has about 3 questions to it. So, for example, there's a lady, I think from Kaswa, who is asking about her small scale business and how to get some
support
help
for informal sector.
Yeah, there's about 1 billion cedis plus in the CAP bus program for micro, small, medium scale enterprises.
How do they apply?
Well, like was announced, you can apply online. Indeed, I think the window is closed now. You can also, or you could have also gone to your district assembly to have inquired about the forms there, so that you can also fill and then apply. I do know that window has closed, but I also do know that in the 10 billion, in the 100 billion window that is being opened, we intend to provide some support there. So if you miss the first window, you may want to be on the lookout for when another window opens, and do well to put in your application. But make sure that you have a TIN number. Make sure you have a TIN number. It is how you get identified by the tax authorities in this state, and it's a requirement for filling this. Now let me come to the question of data and science. July 20th, 20% positivity, and the last 18 days, lots of cases. If you check, our positivity rate currently is under 10%. So this argument of 20%, I'm not too sure, but it is under 10% currently. If he's saying that for a particular period, the positive that came out were about 20%, and he's adding that, or if I am adding that to his argument of the last 18 days, let me remind him of the fact that we mentioned that we had a backlog of samples that needed to be tested. We had a backlog of samples that needed to be tested. Indeed, when the Ghana Health Service does their presentations, you will notice that there's a particular graph, and last week when I was here, I showed that graph, that even when you hear 500 new cases, those cases sometimes were spread over about 11, 12, 13 days when the samples were gathered but had not been tested because they had a shortage in reagents. So it did not represent a single day set of positives. You may have recorded it on a single day, but the samples were taken over a period.
Right.
And that is why the Ghana Health Service publishes the graph of what they call the 7-day moving average, which shows you that on the average, how many cases are you recording a day, or how many infections are you getting in a day? In fact, globally, they are using the 7-day moving average graph. And if you look at Ghana's 7-day moving average graph, you'll notice that the graph is come down, and we're hoping that it will go down a bit more. So the data supports the analysis and the decision that government has made consistently. Now let me come to churches and public transport.
Yeah.
The public health experts, educators, that all of what we are doing is about risk mitigation. This glass that you have here is about risk mitigation. It's to reduce the risk of droplets coming from me to you or from you to me. It does not negate risk or take it away 100%. It reduces the risk. The wearing of the masks, the washing of hands. If you listen to Mr. Damboche, he wore his mask and washed his hands, he still contracted the virus. So all we are doing is about mitigating risks. Now the education they give us is that when you are in a church, singing, shouting, responding, praise the Lord, hallelujah, the Holy Spirit is descended, there's a lot of activity there. The probability or the propensity for droplets to be exchanged or to reach one another is way high. And that's why they say that in the church, wear your mask, but still be socially distant. The public health experts educate us that the risk level there is totally different from when you are sitting on a public transport wearing your mask sitting by yourself. Indeed, there are data of cases that were positive that boarded public transport when they did the contact tracing in the about 4 or 5 different sets of cases that they had, each of which had its own contact traced, about 20-25 contacts of person A who was on a public transport and at the time was not even wearing a mask.
But Kojo, if you say that, it begs a question that how do we find contact of persons we sat in trotro with? Because you don't know these people. So if I contract COVID and I'm found to have been on public transport, I cannot say I was in the trotro or the taxi or the train with X, Y, or Z.
That's not even my point. My point is that they did some work on persons who tested positive. For example, I think in the OT region and other places, who boarded public transport, and they were able to trace which particular vehicle they boarded and did a tracing of who else was on it. You can interview the Ghana Health Service about it, and none of these contacts actually turned positive. So their argument is that now when you add the wearing of masks to it, the risk level is very low there. And that is why they say that if people are wearing their masks and are not involved in singing and shouting and talking on these public transports, and they're also doing the cleaning of the metal railings in the public transport on a regular basis, the risk there can be way mitigated. Here, to mitigate it, this is how they do it.
I wish we could have a more concrete way of analyzing whether the transport operators are also doing their bit, because I'm yet to see any driver. Not all of them. If you went to STC and maybe to VIP, you will find that. But for the many trotro taxis, not all of them are doing it. They are not doing it. But that does not take away the fact that if you are wearing the mask, you are on it, you are not involved in this talking and shouting. You know all these preachers on these buses talking, which we have asked, all of that should cease. The risk will be mitigated. It is a balancing act, Thelma, that we all have to assist succeed. And the advice on this particular matter took a long debate at the task force level before in the end this advice was taken, and our expectation is that if we comply with it, we'll mitigate the risk of spread on public transport. You remember when the churches were, the restrictions were eased initially for churches, we were told that they were supposed to keep a register with names and contact numbers. What has that been like? And I'm saying that, let me just quickly announce the phone lines. You can call us on this program 026-096-9160. You can call and ask the minister your question. Please do keep it very short and brief, and lower the volume on your TV set please also mind the kind of language you use on this platform. Honorable Minister, that register, has it worked? We were told initially that it will register every event.
Well, there was an online platform that the Ministry of Communications advised could be used. I don't have data on how many people used it. But what we have reason to believe is that the majority of churches that opened up complied with the general set of rules, and for that reason, we did not have any outbreak that we could trace to any particular religious gathering. And that is why the President has confidence that as we open up a bit more, these religious bodies will observe this preventive.
Right, here's a question from our WhatsApp. Hello, good evening. I'm Isaac, a business owner in the healthcare sector, and applied for the CABAS program. Anytime I check the status online, it's pending.